Officially 2 weeks away from the start of the NFL draft on April 28th. Daniel Jeremiah, of course, an NFL Network analyst, host of the Move the Sticks podcast, along with Bucky Brooks, and a former scout for your Baltimore Ravens, and he's back with us here on GCR. Daniel, it's Glenn. All right, it's great to chat with you. I want to put this out there. 2 weeks from tonight, I want you to make a prediction. The biggest storyline you guys are going to be talking about on NFL Network that night is going to be what?
I'm going to say the biggest storyline is going to be I think that the wideouts are going to go flying off the board, and that's going to be a little bit of a departure from what we've seen over the last few years, just in terms of the concept of, man, these day two receivers that the NFL draft has produced. When you think about the recent guys like Debo and DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin and on and on and on, A.J. Brown, it goes on. And teams, you say, okay, well, that's the sweet spot for wideouts. And I think this year you're going to see these guys all get bumped up.
Wow.
I think the cost of receivers in free agency and via trade, that's definitely sent alarm bells off around these draft rooms, and I think it's going to elevate these wideouts. And it's a good group. So I think we're going to see a boatload of these guys go, and they're going to go high.
All right, so let me pose it to you this way then, because for the first time I think ever you and I are talking about a draft, we're not talking about wide receiver with the Baltimore Ravens. But that being said, is there a player that you would say, hey, look, you can like Rashad Bateman, you can like Hollywood Brown, but if this guy's sitting there at 14, you absolutely would be well suited to just go ahead and take this player because of exactly what you're talking about, the cost of wide receiver and just how talented that particular player is.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there'd be two guys that I'd be really tempted if I was Baltimore. And like you said, they're well invested in the position. But if you were up there and all of a sudden at pick 14, my highest rated receiver in the draft is Garrett Wilson. He's my fifth overall player. That's just too good of a value to pass up. I mean, he is a pure number one wideout, in my opinion. And then you get Drake London would be the other one who I think is my eighth or ninth player. I think that's another one who's value. And I actually love that fit because he kind of complements the guys that they have. That gives them that big power forward, who can block and do a lot of the dirty work as well as be a big-time red zone threat. So he's got kind of that Ravens kind of bully kind of edge to him too. So those would be the two I would say you'd have to think long and hard about, even though you feel pretty good about the group you got.
Right, no doubt, no doubt. Again, weird that you and I aren't just breaking down wide receivers for the entirety of this conversation. Daniel Jeremiah with us on Glenn Clark Radio. Okay, so the last time you did a mock draft, you had George Karlaftis from Purdue going to the Ravens. It feels like edge rush, corner, and maybe we'll throw Jordan Davis's name in specifically, defensive line. It feels like that's sort of, based on what the Ravens have done, the most likely area. When you did that, and again, I know it's been a couple of weeks, was it unique with the fit with George Karlaftis, and do you still sort of feel like he's the guy that makes the most sense at 14?
Well, I just think of, kind of the recent vintage of rusher that they've had. I would say, even Owe, and Owe is just a more dynamic, more explosive player, but they're edge setters, they're physical, they're power rushers. Zadarius Smith, Judon, you kind of go back through all those guys. Those guys all were just heavy-handed, physical, tough dudes. So he just kind of fit from a profile standpoint from the Ravens. Now, teams are all over the map on him. Some teams really like him. Some teams don't think he's a first-round guy. So he's a very polarizing player. But, again, I kind of look at that kind of soul of the Ravens and what they value, and he kind of fits kind of how they play and who they are.
If they're going to look for someone who can be productive early on, Daniel, I mean, obviously David Ajabo is a wild card, right? And I don't know what to make of that. But if they're going to look for someone who can step in and immediately be productive, does it have to be at 14, or can that guy be had in the second or the third round?
No, I think this draft's pretty deep at edge rusher. So, I don't think you're limited to the first round. I think you get outside the first round and you're going to see that next group of guys, which, could include a Boye Mafe. He might fall out of the first round. He's in that range. Arnold Ebiketie from Penn State's a good player. You've got a real fastball in Nick Benito from Oklahoma. Josh Pascal is a name. He's a guy that kind of has that Ravens mentality. That would be one I wouldn't sleep on on day two. So, it's a good, deep group of edge rushers. I wouldn't feel like you had the proverbial gun to your head to take one at 14.
course, NFL Network will have live coverage of the 2022 NFL Draft from Vegas, April 28th through 30th. Daniel, as the cornerbacks go, Sauce Gardner, I'm assuming, is not going to be falling to the Baltimore Ravens at 14. If that's the case, the next group of guys, right, the Trent McDuffies and
Yeah.
the Derek Stingleys, how does that group shake out in terms of who you think would be the best fit for the Baltimore Ravens?
Well, I mean, Trent McDuffie fits everybody because he's just super clean. You know exactly what you're getting. The tape is really good. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's got the ability. If you want to play him inside, you can play him inside, play outside. Tough, really, really a tough kid. So that to me is a great fit. Stingley offers even a little bit more just in terms of the twitch and the athleticism and even the ball skills. But it's been well documented. You got to go back to 2019
Yep.
to see him play like that. So there's a little bit of a gamble, a little bit of a risk. But the one thing the Ravens are really good at, and Eric DeCosta does a great job with it, is kind of determining value and maneuvering around the board to give themselves opportunities to take shots. And that could be a situation where maybe if Stingley started to slide a little bit and maybe they move back and pick up an extra pick or two, then they feel like, okay, we've got an opportunity to take a chance here. Let's gamble on greatness.
So let me go back to Ajabo based on what you just said there, right? Like, dude, I hate the fact that I feel this way. I feel like such a rube every time I say, hey, look, you've got the guy's defensive coordinator. And I feel this way kind of a little bit about a lot of the Michigan prospects, right? Even some of the guys later in the draft, the Chris Hintons and the Josh Rosses of the world, where I'm like, doesn't there have to be some value for that? What do you do about Ajabo? Where could you take him? Where does his talent meet the, hey, if you got to wait, it's worth it to wait because he makes sense to grab a guy like that for the future?
Well, I think he's a tricky one because he really has kind of that 1 year. He's still, he was a liability against the run, which kind of goes back to what I was saying about how the Ravens have typically. By the way, I think the Fast and the
What?
Furious
Yeah,
movie
what's
is
going
next to
on?
me right now.
Jeez.
Goodness gracious.
You had a Formula One race right now?
I know. I'm coming up to a stop sign, so he's gonna let it rip again here. We're not racing, I promise.
I believe you.
But that he doesn't really fit from a stylistic standpoint in terms of having those more physical edge guys that they've had in the past. So that's the only reason I would say that. Obviously there's the connections there, and you've got the defensive coordinator. You obviously got John and Jim, and you can connect all the dots. But when you add in the fact that he's not great against the run, he doesn't have a long history of production, and now on top of that, you throw in an Achilles. I think it's the second round move. I think if he's there in the second round, you run the card up and you feel great about it, even if this is a redshirt year. But definitely I could not endorse it at 14, and I probably couldn't even endorse it in a trade back scenario.
I think that's totally reasonable. Jordan Davis, I'm in love with him. He is the guy that I just look at and say, he's the most physical freak, and I get it. He didn't play 50% of the snaps, and I've heard all of it. When I see him on a football field, I say, that's a monster. That's a guy that wrecks. And I'm not trying to make him Aaron Donald because nobody can be Aaron Donald, of course. There's one of those. But why wouldn't Jordan Davis, if he's sitting there at 14, why wouldn't you be racing up to the podium and saying, give me this human that just it's like the way we describe Brock Lesnar as a professional wrestler. He's not like other humans.
Yeah, that's a compelling argument. I can't push back on that. The discussion that's taken place in draft rooms has been, not necessarily just him coming off the field, because I think you can justify that by everybody knows all the guys they had there on that front. But just it's a little bit of a gamble in terms of just the pass rush, potential, because you just haven't seen all of it put together yet. But I'm looking at that big body and how athletic he is, and you talk to him, he's a smart kid. He's worked really hard, get himself in good shape, so I think the work ethic's there. You kind of add all those things up, and, man, you'd like to think he'd be able to figure that out.
Boy, man, part of it is just me thinking about how much Haloti Ngata made this franchise different for so long, right? Like what he allowed the rest of your defense to do. I don't know. I can't help it. I am so enamored with Jordan Davis, dude. It is.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I was looking for a comp for him, and I was there when we took Haloti, and Halotti's a massive human being. This guy's like 2 inches taller.
Right.
So when I was looking for comparisons, and I think this guy has, people look back on this player and say, oh, he was a bust or wasn't any good. But there's a reason why Albert Hainsworth got $100 million
Yeah, that's a good point.
because of what he did in Tennessee as a young player, and this guy reminds me of a young Albert Hainsworth.
All right, is there anybody else, knowing what you know about the Baltimore Ravens and how Eric and, Ozzie Still to this day and Joe Ortiz, how they work, is there anybody else that you look at and say, look, man, if this guy's sitting there, people have talked about Thibodeau, if this guy's sitting there,
Yeah.
this absolutely makes all the sense in the world as something that the Baltimore Ravens would do.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if Sauce Gardner were to get close, that would be kind of the one player I could see them trying to move up to get.
Okay.
Just because of the size, the athleticism, the ball skills, all that stuff, the attitude. He's another one I just see kind of as a Raven type player. So that would be one. I don't think there's any chance that he gets to where they're picking, but if he got in range, they've got the assets. They can move up a little bit and get him.
All right, and my last one for you. Everybody on the planet locally has Chigakonkwo in their Ravens 7-round mock draft because he's a Maryland guy, because the Ravens use tight ends, the whole deal. We're not talking about somebody who's going to go in the first couple of rounds, but
Yeah.
what do you know about Chig? And do you say, like, hey, man, that really would make some sense given his athleticism, what he could bring to the table in that type of offense?
Yeah, and I'm not so sure you couldn't give him some fullback snaps too.
Yeah.
And cross train him there. So no, they collect them. They collect tight ends like little kids collect baseball cards. So I would definitely not rule that out.
No doubt. All right, at Move the Sticks on Twitter is how you follow him. The Move the Sticks podcast, and of course draft coverage on NFL Network, April 28th through 30th. Daniel Jeremiah, I know you got to do a ton of these. Really appreciate you taking a couple of minutes for us, my friend.
You're the best, Glenn. Thanks for keeping me company on the way to work here.
And please don't let that guy get a wreck. All right.
Good night, man.